Hello, you're watching Afternoon Live. I'm Simon McCoy. Today at 2, thousands of jobs at risk after the collapse of the construction giant Carillion. But why were they still getting government contracts right up until the last minute?
It's a matter of great regret that this liquidation has taken place, but the government's priority, rightly, has been to ensure protection for key public services.
Live across the country at sites now at a standstill following today's announcement. Giving up his girlfriend to keep his leadership, UKIP's Henry Bolton says he's ended his relationship with the 25-year-old over her racist comments about Meghan Markle. Fears of disease spreading in the world's biggest refugee camp. Almost 500,000 Rohingya children are being vaccinated in Bangladesh. And coming up on Afternoon Live, we've got all the sport with Hugh and lots in football.
There is plenty of football stories today, Simon, but sad news. Firstly, we'll be looking at the heartfelt tributes that have been paid to the former West Brom striker Cyril Regis. And there's a new manager for Wales as well, a big first job for Ryan Giggs. All the details at past.
Hugh, thank you very much. Let's get a weather update with Ben. It's turning chilly.
Sure is, Simon. That's just one of the things the weather will throw at us this week. Some cold weather, but also some heavy wintry showers. Some places will see a lot of snow. And for some, it'll be very windy as well. I'll have all the details later on.
Thank you very much, Ben. Also coming up, some breaking news about Ben Stokes. Don't go away before we give you that. And also, the Scottish Government warns that Scotland's economy would be £12.7 billion a year worse off under a so-called hard Brexit. The Scottish Conservatives dismissed the analysis as completely over-the-top scaremongering. Hello everyone, this is Afternoon Live. I'm Simon McCoy, bringing all those stories in just a moment. But first, breaking news about Ben Stokes, who has been charged with a fray after that fight at a Bristol nightclub. I'll bring you all of that news in just a moment. But more on our main story. In today's collapse of construction giant Carillion has put the role of private companies getting government contracts under an intense spotlight. Even after profit warnings, they were still being awarded huge contracts. Then, just before 7 o'clock this morning, the announcement that the company had gone into liquidation after talks between the firm, its lenders and the government failed to reach a deal to save it. Taxpayers will have to provide funding to maintain the public services, but for thousands of others, including some contractors, there's uncertainty. And then there's the pension. Thousands of current and former staff have money in Carillion pension funds, which have a deficit of almost £600 million. Here's our business correspondent, Simon Gompertz.
The bigger they are, the harder for everyone when they fall. Carillion was the new name for a huge business taking in age-old construction brands like Wimpey, Alfred McAlpine, Tarmac and Molem. And they don't just build, they manage hundreds of operating theatres for the NHS, maintain many prisons and army accommodation, and serve and provide school dinners. All that with the weight of £900 million in debt and the deficit in the company pension fund of £590 million. The impact of not being able to carry on is already being felt.
Well, it's a disaster. There are thousands of subcontractors, agency labour, there are suppliers who won't get paid. We're already being told that people aren't being paid. Carillion's fuel cards are not working this morning, so staff that are trying to get to work in Carillion vans are not being able to fill up their vans. So the thing is collapsing around us, and the government seems to have this laissez-faire attitude, and they've got to take steps that assure people of their futures.
There were desperate and fruitless rescue talks in the Cabinet Office in Westminster. Then the announcement just before 7 this morning that the official receiver had taken charge of the salvage operation. Affected are 20,000 UK staff. The government has said all employees should keep coming to work, promising they'll continue to get paid. There are 28,000 in the pension scheme, who may get lower pensions, even though the Pension Protection Fund will step in. Customers, especially people using public services, have been told the government will keep funding going to keep them running. And of course there's an impact on the creditors, shareholders and lenders likely to lose what they've put in. Carillion got involved in building the infrastructure for the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, and it's had serious disputes over payments. Ministers say they won't use taxpayers' money to bail out a private sector company, but they will give the official receiver funds to maintain public services.
It's going to be managed in an orderly fashion via the official receiver. And that means we can continue to operate those key public services in hospitals, schools, prisons and so on without, I hope, much disruption.
A Carillion company built the original Battersea Power Station. The group's put up much of the fabric of the UK since then, including GCHQ, the UK's intelligence hub, and at Liverpool's Anfield Football Stadium, the new main stand. Now there's an anxious wait to see which jobs can be saved, how much disruption there will be. Simon Gompertz, BBC News.
Well, let's get the picture from around the country. Ben Ando is in Cambridgeshire on the A14, a Carillion project. Chris Page is at the Northern Ireland Housing Executive in Belfast, and Peter Plisner is in Wolverhampton at the Carillion headquarters. Let's go to Ben Ando first. Ben.
Well, yes, here the A14 is a huge project. It started last year, although it's been planned for many years before that. It's a £1.5 billion scheme due to open in 2021 to improve links between the major sea container ports down in the southeast of England at Felixstowe and the rest of the country. The A14 as it stands, as drivers will know, is a massive gridlock. This is designed to totally improve things, but it's a joint project between Balfour Beatty and Carillion. The question people here are asking is, what impact will the collapse of Carillion have on this scheme and of course the many other transport construction schemes that Carillion are working on around the country? The government is telling Carillion employees that they should continue to go to work, but subcontractors, small firms that Carillion owes money to, well, for them things aren't so sure, and at the moment many are facing an uncertain few days while they wait to find out what's going to happen. With more news now from Northern Ireland, here's my colleague Chris Page.
Yes, well, Carillion have between 200 and 300 workers here in Northern Ireland. Most of the work they do is for the organisation based in that building there, the Housing Executive, Northern Ireland's public housing authority, the biggest landlord in Northern Ireland. It owns more than 86,000 homes. So Carillion has three major contracts with the Housing Executive worth about £35 million a year, covering housing maintenance and gas installation. Now, officials here have been aware for several days now of the possibility that Carillion might collapse, so they've had contingency plans in place. And it's understood that the hope is that the work will be passed over to other providers with a minimum of disruption. There's also no great sense foreboding about potential job losses. At the moment, Carillion workers are meeting with trade union representatives over in Carillion's HQ here in East Belfast. There may well be, after that meeting, some more indications about the impact potentially on individual workers. This may well be the sort of issue that if there was a devolved government in place, the business minister, for example, might want to get well stuck in. But because the Stormont Executive remains down more than a year after it collapsed, there is no minister to do that job. However, a group of politicians at Stormont, a group of Stormont Assembly members with an interest in the construction industry, the all-party group on construction, have been holding a meeting there this lunchtime to try to get some kind of cross-party consensus so that they can then take the case to the likes of the Housing Executive and try, they say, to ensure that all the jobs that Carillion have here are protected. That's the picture in Northern Ireland. Now let's go over to my colleague Peter Plisner in Wolverhampton.
Yes, well, this is Carillion's national headquarters behind me. 400 people work here, or at least they did until this morning. They were in a sombre mood when they came to work this morning. They didn't want to talk to the media. Receivers are inside trying to sort out what they can do in terms of the liquidation. We're told this lunchtime that elsewhere in Wolverhampton, a task force meeting is taking place to help those who are being made redundant, and the wider construction supply chain, which there's a lot of concern about, because obviously companies will be owed money and they're unlikely to get much of it back, and that could push more companies into administration or liquidation. So there are certainly worries, and that's the reason they're holding this task force meeting. We should get a report on exactly what was discussed later on this afternoon.
Gentlemen, thank you all very much for that update there from Cambridgeshire, Belfast and Wolverhampton. Let's speak now to the Chief Political Correspondent with the Financial Times, Jim Packard. Jim, where did this go wrong? Where does the Carillion story turn into this nightmare?
So Carillion is not a household name. Even today, a lot of people still wouldn't have really heard of it. But not so long ago, it had a market capitalisation of £2 billion. It had £16 billion worth of contracts, absolutely huge in the world of construction and support services. But the problems began, and a lot of us wouldn't have noticed this, in July last year, 6 months ago, when they put out a profit warning and they said they were having to write down their assets by £800 million because of problems at 3 very big contracts. And one of those was a hospital in Liverpool, one of them was a hospital in the Midlands, and the other one was a big bypass scheme up in Aberdeen. And different things had gone wrong with each of them, cost overruns, construction problems, and they were finally admitting to the stock market that they did have this major issue. And interestingly, since then, the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, has said that they are examining statements made up in the run-up to that, basically trying to find out whether the company had been completely honest before July 2017 about these problems that were going on. So you had that in July, you then had 2 further profit warnings in the autumn, and what happens, it's not quite the same as the credit crunch, but the similarity, I suppose, is that when we had the financial meltdown nearly a decade ago, it was all about trust and whether banks would keep lending to each other when they knew that the other bank was in major financial difficulties. And what's happened with Carillion is that they found it harder and harder to borrow. Towards Christmas, they were borrowing at an interest rate of over 10%. They were going to some quite unlikely sources of finance. And then eventually they gathered their main creditors last week. There was a big gathering down in Canary Wharf, and major banks were asked if they could put up another £300 million, and they said no. They said, we'll only do it if the government steps in and guarantees part of the business. And the government, during a series of meetings that began on Thursday last week, overseen by David Lidington, who's the Cabinet Office Secretary, and the government has basically said, no, we are not going to prop you up. And that is why we're seeing a wipeout of the shareholders, of the bondholders, and now those huge question marks we see over the staff, 43,000 workers, of which 19,500 are in Britain, and also hundreds and hundreds of small suppliers who've been working for them and who now everything is up in the air.
Jim, the focus, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, but a lot of people now saying, hang on a minute, why was the government still giving a massive contract, 2 big contracts, even after Carillion said they were having problems?
It's a very good question. It's the question that's been raised by the Labour Party overnight. I think the answer to that is that, you know, bear in mind that Carillion, as I was saying, is a huge company. It's the 2nd biggest construction company in Britain. And profit warnings are not so unusual. Profit warnings don't necessarily mean that you're about to collapse. Loads of companies have profit warnings, and then a few years later, they're back on their feet again. And so you had on July the 10th last year, you had the first profit warning by Carillion. And then on July the 17th was the awarding of the biggest contract of last year, which was on High Speed Rail 2, HS2, and that was worth £1.4 billion. And yes, Chris Grayling, the Transport Secretary, is in the spotlight with people saying, why did you do this when the shares in Carillion had slumped only a week earlier? I think the answer is threefold. The first answer is that that tendering process would have gone on for months and months, and on various different criteria. Carillion, maybe the bidding was cheaper or they offered the best service. They had kind of already won it. So for the government to have pulled out at that point, you'd basically be pitching yourself into a potential legal action by Carillion. I think the second, possibly bigger point is that if you, the government, announce we are no longer giving any contracts to a big British company, then you are potentially sending them into a death spiral and you are hastening their demise. And which government and which cabinet ministers want to be responsible for that? I think the questions become more legitimate as you go further into the autumn. There are 2 more profit warnings, and again, the company still wins 2 more contracts. And the criticism from people like Vince Cable, leader of the Liberal Democrats, is that the government was, inverted commas, feeding Carillion contracts to try and keep them afloat. And John Trickett, who's a Labour spokesman on the Cabinet Office, he's saying that the government, Whitehall, does have systems in place whereby if a company is under major financial stress, they should be marked down and it should be harder for them to get contracts. But you still come back to that fundamental philosophical question, which is, does the government really want to kick a company in the teeth when they're down?
Jim Pickard, thank you very much. That's Jim Pickard there of the Financial Times. Now let's bring you more on that breaking news. We're just hearing from the Crown Prosecution Service that they have passed a file of evidence from Avon and Somerset Police in relation to an incident of disorder in the Bristol city centre, all to do, of course, with Ben Stokes. Let's go over now to our sports correspondent, David Ornstein, who is at Lords. What does this all mean? What have they said?
The CPS have authorised Avon and Somerset Police to charge Ben Stokes and 2 other men with a fray in relation to an incident that took place in the early hours of the 25th of September in Bristol, in the Clifton area of the city. Ben Stokes, 26, Ryan Alley, 28, and Ryan Hale, 26. It's my understanding that Mr. Alley and Hale were not part of the party that was with Ben Stokes. However, we don't know if this was either of the individuals that Ben Stokes appeared in a video released by The Sun at the time, appeared to be in confrontation with. Now, I'll read some of the statement to you. The CPS was passed a file of evidence by Avon and Somerset Police on the 29th of November in relation to an incident of disorder in Bristol city centre. Further material was subsequently received in late December. Following a review of all of the available evidence, the CPS has today authorised the police to charge 3 men with a fray in connection to the incident. All of them are due to appear before Bristol Magistrates Court on a date to be fixed in relation to this charge, and that date is set to be confirmed shortly. It's worth pointing out that a fray carries a maximum sentence of 3 years in prison and or a fine. And as I said, this is in relation to an incident that occurred on the 25th of September in the early hours after Stokes was playing for England in a one-day international against the West Indies. He subsequently missed the final 2 one-day internationals of that series and was ruled out of the Ashes as the 4-month investigation took place. The CPS have been reviewing the evidence for 6 weeks and have now made this charging decision. In the incident, we know that one gentleman suffered a fractured eye socket, but very little more detail than that. The England and Wales Cricket Board have always said that once the charging decision has been announced, that they would convene, a board meeting would take place within 48 hours to decide what cricketing action to take against Stokes. And he has to go through now. He faces charges under the Cricket Disciplinary Commission, which has been on hold during this process. So there could be further repercussions for Ben Stokes from a cricketing point of view. But for now, we'll await the date of his first court appearance.
David Ornstein at Lords, thank you very much. You're watching Afternoon Live. These are our headlines this afternoon. 20,000 jobs at risk as one of the UK's biggest construction companies, Carillion, goes into liquidation. The leader of UKIP says he's no longer dating a model after it emerged she'd sent racist texts about Prince Harry's fiancée, Meghan Markle. England cricketer Ben Stokes has been charged with a fray over an incident outside a Bristol nightclub which left a man with a fractured eye socket. In a moment, fears of disease spreading in the world's biggest refugee camp. Almost 500,000 Rohingya children are being vaccinated in Bangladesh.
And in sport, Ryan Giggs speaks of his pride at being named the new manager of Wales. He replaces Chris Coleman, who stepped down in November after failing to qualify for this summer's World Cup in Russia. Tributes have been paid to the former England and West Bromwich Albion striker Cyril Regis, who has died at the age of 59. He scored 112 goals during his time at the Hawthorns. Former England captain Rio Ferdinand called him a great man who would always be remembered. And British number 2 Carl Edmund is celebrating the best win of his career. He beat 11th seed Kevin Anderson over 5 sets to reach the second round at the Australian Open. And I'll be back with more on those stories just after past.
The UKIP leader Henry Bolton has insisted he won't stand down over racist comments made by his girlfriend. Mr Bolton says his romance with Jo Marnie is over after she sent texts saying Prince Harry's fiancée, Meghan Markle, would taint the royal family. Ms Marnie has been suspended from UKIP over the comments, for which she has apologised. Let's get more to this story with Paul Oakden, who's party chairman for UKIP. He joins me from our Birmingham studio. So he says that he's staying as UKIP leader. Is that sustainable?
Well, we shall see, Simon. I think that Henry made a very important decision yesterday. I think it was the right decision. In your feed up there, you referred to text from his girlfriend. She's now not his girlfriend. It's important to make that point. He made that decision based on discovering things about her that clearly didn't sit at all well with him. It didn't sit well with the party either, which is why I took the decision to immediately suspend the membership of Miss Marnie. Now, this is an issue on which many members feel that they want to have their say. There is going to be a process through which they have their ability to do that over the next week. Whether or not at the end of that Henry will still be in a position that he wants to carry this forward with the support of the party remains to be seen.
He's your fourth leader since the referendum. You need this like a hole in the head, don't you?
Well, it is absolutely true, Simon. This is not a distraction that UKIP would in any way want. At the moment, we have Tony Blair, Nick Clegg, Lord Adonis trying to ride roughshod over democracy. It is absolutely crucial that UKIP is fit to join a grand coalition now and take that fight for Brexit on over the next 12 months. Really, that's the only thing that matters. It is important that the party is fit to fight, and part of that will be that a majority of members are supportive of the leader. We're going to go through a very clear process now to make sure that that remains the case for the members of our party. Once that process is over, and it will be over quickly, then hopefully we can focus back onto the job at hand, which is delivering Brexit, which is what UKIP are all about.
What do you say, Paul, to those who say that we're watching the death throes of UKIP?
I would say that the same things were said 12 months ago, 13 months ago. I was appointed as an interim chairman 18 months ago for 2 months. During that 18-month period, we've had issues, it's true to say, but the truth remains that UKIP has thousands upon thousands of members who understand that we are the biggest grassroots organisation prepared to go out and campaign for Brexit. Brexit's going to become the #1 issue on the ground over the next 12 months. Of that, there's no doubt. It is crucial that UKIP plays its part. That's exactly why the membership is staying with us. It's why we need to close this issue off quickly, and I absolutely agree with that. It's why we need the right leader. I absolutely agree with that. I think Henry has the ability to lead this party through that period. If the membership agree with that, given what's happened, then hopefully we can all focus on and crack on from the end of this month.
On the face of it, is it pretty callous? You know, his leadership's under threat, so he just drops his girlfriend.
Well, I don't think that's a fair assessment of the situation, Simon. The two of them had been dating clearly for 3.5 weeks. Information came to light, which I think he referred to himself this morning as being incompatible with his leadership. They are not views that have any place in politics in our party whatsoever, which is why we have distanced ourselves by suspending Miss Marnie from the party. He's made a personal decision to distance himself. I think that was the right decision. I don't think that's callous. I think that's the only decision he could make, irrespective of his position.
Do you think he will still be leader in a month's time?
Well, I'm not going to predetermine what the membership decide to do. Our membership have been stoical over the last 18 months. They will continue to be that way. They will do what's in the best interests of UKIP, knowing perfectly well that that runs hand in hand with what's in the best interests of Britain during this Brexit negotiation.
Paul Oakden, thank you very much for joining us. Now talks are underway between officials from Myanmar and Bangladesh to decide how to repatriate hundreds of thousands of Rohingya Muslims who were forced to flee violence against them in Myanmar last year. More than 650,000 Rohingyas are now living in the world's largest refugee camp, Kutupalong, near Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, and there are fears that disease there will spread. Many of them are children. Now the British government says it will provide £2 million towards the cost of vaccinating children against diphtheria. Well, the BBC's Justin Rowlatt is at what is now the world's largest refugee camp at Kutupalong in Cox's Bazar. He joins us now. Justin.
That's absolutely right. This is now an absolutely vast settlement, more than 850,000 people in total. We're in the middle of the biggest of all the camps. There's about 650,000 people in this camp. And let's just take a look at the camp, because you can see it with the lights that we've got here. You can get an idea of the kind of structures that you've got here. So these are the homes that mostly refugees built when they first arrived here. They're made out of bamboo and tarpaulin. You can see each of these homes would have at least one family in them. They're very basic shelters. They're fairly robust given the materials they're made of, but they are not strong enough to weather storms. Now, that is what is in prospect for these communities, because the rainy season begins, the first storms come in, they form in the Bay of Bengal and hit the coast of Bangladesh beginning in April. Now, here's a statistic for you. In April, there is twice as much rain here in southern Bangladesh as there is in the rainiest month in Britain. And after that, it just gets wetter and wetter, peaking in June, July, August, and ending in September. So this is the dry season. This all looks kind of fairly livable now. It is going to be be absolutely soaking in a few months' time, and that is a real challenge for the refugees living here and for the people who manage the refugee camps. A couple of days ago, I was out with the head of shelter for the International Organization for Migration, which is the UN agency that is overseeing the camps in which most of the Rohingya refugees are living.
If you could choose a location for a refugee camp, this would not be it. Just take a look. The conditions are, to say the least, challenging, despite the work that's being put in. And remember, this is the dry season. Imagine what it'll be like when the first rains and cyclones come in April. And this isn't even a particularly bad storm.
So we're in the middle of what is now the world's biggest refugee camp, and I'm with Graham Eastman. Now, it's Graham's job to try and make sure that these places are as safe and livable and healthy as they can be, and that is quite a challenge, isn't it, Graham? What sort of things are you looking at?
It's a huge challenge. I mean, you only have to look around to see the number of challenges that we face. Obviously, this came about because of the rapid settlement of this area, but as you can see, we've got open sewage.
So what the audience won't appreciate is quite how pungent this little stream is, because it's presumably carrying fecal matter, toilet matter, water waste. It's a disease risk, presumably. And it's really challenging geography, isn't it? I mean, just look up here, and this is a really interesting example.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, as you can see, we have lots of very steep hills and valleys, and when the monsoons come, obviously the water's going to be running in all types of directions, and you can already see that there's landslides and more potential for landslides.
Because actually there are big fissures and cracks up on the hillside there, and it looks as if some of the land's already fallen, and yet above it you've got, I guess those are houses, are they?
Those are shelters, and there's probably 5 to 6 families in those shelters. So we need to relocate these people. We need to reinforce earth and where they are living. We've got to improve the general environment as best we can. We can only do this on an incremental basis, such as you're seeing with the drainage channel. What I will say is that when the cyclone and the monsoon season start, we're going to be put backwards. A lot of this is going to be washed away. The landscape around us will change visibly, will change enormously. So yeah, we've got a huge task. There's going to be another emergency within this emergency.
So, you know, warning there from the International Organization for Migration, which manages much of these camps. But I have to say, one of the things that's really struck me, and I've been reporting this right from the beginning of the crisis, is just how strong and resilient the Rohingya people are. They built these camps, they've settled in communities, created strong communities here in southeastern Bangladesh, and the storms are coming, but I am confident that the people I've met will be able to weather those storms.
Justin, thank you very much. Justin Rowlett there at Cox's Bazar. Ryan Giggs has been appointed as the new Welsh football manager. The former Manchester United winger, who's 44, has signed a 4-year contract. He spoke at a news conference a few minutes ago.
Well, it obviously came about when Cookie left the job. There's an opportunity there. I had the interview on Thursday, and we kept in dialogue over the weekend. And for me, it was just an opportunity that I couldn't turn down. You know, I had the assistant manager role at Manchester United after I finished playing, which I loved, which I enjoyed. Obviously, I've not done that for 18 months now, and I was just itching to get back into football because that's where I feel comfortable, that's where I belong. And tremendously honoured and proud to be the next Welsh manager. I'm not on social media for that very reason. So I haven't seen much of the criticism, but like I said to Rob Paul, I know that the criticism is going to come, and the way to combat that is to win games and give it my all, which I'll do.
That was Ryan Giggs. Plenty more coming up on that in the sport. But first, let's have a look at the weather. Ben Rich is here with an inspiring photograph showing, what, a bit of rain?
Yeah, a bit of rain, yeah. But we didn't get off to the most auspicious of starts.
Is that the best you got today?
We actually, do you know what? We actually quite like this one, where we were picking out one of our pictures today. But, I mean, you know, I'll bring you another one next time, obviously. But, you know, it kind of tells the story, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. OK, well, how about this? I think you'll like this one a little bit better. Now, here we go. This is a beautiful picture. from the Isle of Lewis. It kind of tells the story of what the rest of the week is going to be like, really, because there'll be some sunshine, but notice some big shower clouds starting to develop. There are going to be a lot of showers over the next few days, and those showers will be rain, yes, but also some of the showers will fall as snow. Now, you might look at this and think, well, there's not going to be that much snow, is there? Actually, for some hills in the north, there could be 15, 20 centimetres of snow during this week from those frequent showers, and it's going to feel really cold. Now, the wind chill is going to become a big feature. These are the temperatures on the thermometer. 1-2 degrees there for Glasgow and Newcastle. But flip them round, and we're going to feel like sub-zero. So it might feel like -5 in Glasgow tomorrow afternoon. So wrap up warm, cold week ahead. Plenty going on.
Right. What else is going on?
What else is going on? Well, it is all about this cold air, really, coming in from the northwest. These northwesterly winds, pretty strong winds at that. Gales or severe gales developing in places through the week. And in that cold air, we've started to introduce some showers. The showers mostly falling as rain at the moment, but just beginning to turn wintry now over high ground in Scotland. And really, the process that we'll see through the rest of today into tonight is those wintry showers becoming more prevalent that bit further south. So this afternoon, turning increasingly chilly, plenty of showers. And then into tonight, notice we see a bit more snow showing up on the map. Initially over the high ground of Scotland, but to lower levels here, also Northern Ireland and into Northern England, and over the hills to the Midlands and Wales, we'll see some snow mixed in as well. Further south, any showers will be falling as rain because it's that bit milder here, but for northern areas, it's going to be cold enough for a widespread frost and some ice. So if you have travel plans for tomorrow morning, bear in mind a lot of snow showers across Scotland, icy stretches on untreated roads. It is going to be pretty precarious out there in places, and the snow also for Northern Ireland, Northern England to increasingly low levels as we go on through the day. Now, East Anglia in the southeast will escape most of the showers. Actually, a dry, fairly bright start here, but there'll be showers across Wales, these increasingly turning wintry. Mostly rain showers across the southwest of England. And you'll notice the strength of that wind. Gales in places out west of those showers continue to relentlessly pile in across the country. A lot of snow showing up on our chart, and it's because some places will have shower after shower after shower that some places will see those pretty impressively high snowfall totals. And there's a reminder of your temperatures on Tuesday afternoon, 1 to 7 degrees. But remember, the strength of the wind will make it feel that bit colder. Now, Wednesday, on the face of it, a similar looking day. Still the cold northwesterly winds, still the wintry showers, best of the sunshine down towards the south and the east. But just behind me here, the first sign of quite a big change for the middle of the week during Wednesday night. This deep area of low pressure looks like it's going to hurtle in from the west. Now, this is still a few days off, bit of uncertainty about the exact detail, but we're likely to see gales on the southern flank of the low, perhaps some snow further north. But we'll push that rough weather away during Thursday, and we're back into those cold northwesterly winds with some sunshine and some hefty wintry showers.